You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. You're listening to us on CBS Radio, WJFK 1580 AM, or visiting us at WMCLive.com for this and for any of our previous episodes. Look for WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter, and you can now stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast worldwide, anytime, at iTunes. This week we begin with the Olympics. Now, I'm a notorious non-expert where athletics are concerned, so, to my delight, award-winning sports journalist Amy K. Nelson starts today calling the plays for us as periodic reporter and commentator and general feminist sports maven, fresh from her years at ESPN. Then we welcome Black History Month by celebrating African-American feminists and womanists online with a two-segment special, a quartet of influential writers, activists, and bloggers. We also look at a new book about Black women vocalists' influence on the civil rights movement. Last, Fighting Words this week will be my, you could say, meditation on Sally Hemmings. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. On January 18th, the Dallas Morning News in Texas published a story by their senior political reporter Wayne Slater, which was a so-called expose about Texas Democratic Senator Wendy Davis, who is running for governor and who, you will remember, famously filibustered on behalf of reproductive rights for women last July. Among his so-called accusations, Davis claimed to be divorced at age 19 when she was only separated from her first husband at 19. That's when she filed for divorce, and the divorce actually became final when she was 21. Wow, big inaccuracy there. Davis, who had her first child at age 19, has often spoken of living in a trailer with her infant daughter, alone. Slater arrogantly reported that Davis, in fact, quote, only lived a few months in the family mobile home before moving to an apartment, close quote. I would like to see him at age 19 alone with a brand new baby for the first time in a trailer, survive even for 2 days, let alone months. And he doesn't say what his idea of a few is. But he does go on to state that Davis left her 2 daughters with her second husband, Jeff Davis, while attending Harvard. She was going to school. Men have never done this, of course. Slater claims that Jeff Davis, that husband, was awarded, quote, physical custody in their divorce, insinuating that Davis is a bad mother. The truth is actually that according to divorce records, she and her husband were granted, quote, joint conservatorship of their child, Drew, close quote, who was a teenager at the time. This is a flat-out inaccuracy on his part. And his parting shot at her is the accusation that Jeff Davis cashed in his 401k and took out a loan to pay for Wendy's schooling, and that she left him soon after he paid her tuition. He quotes Jeff Davis saying that it was ironic. I made the last payment on the school loan, and it was the next day that she left. Wow. An unbiased piece that uses as its primary source ex-husbands. Well, the paper was inundated by letters from other journalists at other papers, as well as by letters from women. And their response was amazing. The managing editor gave a short paragraph in the paper. We've received a number of letters recently alleging that Wayne Slater's January 18th story on Wendy Davis's campaign biography contains serious errors. The one thing he will admit as he grandstands is that the piece could have been clearer and more complete. Well, this is why we have a Women's Media Center. And this is why today I am establishing the Ink Smear Award for Bad Journalism, the first one of which goes to the Dallas, Texas Morning News You bet. Now it's time for the politics of sports. Amy K. Nelson is an award-winning freelance multimedia journalist based in New York City whose work has appeared in Slate and Deadspin. She is a former senior correspondent at SB Nation and best known for her work at ESPN. And she's appeared on SportsCenter, Baseball Tonight, and Outside the Lines, and more. She guested on this program not too long ago to discuss her story for The Hairpin, where she'd written about sexism in the sports media. And it was shared widely, the story, and so much so that Sports Illustrated used it as a platform for a large roundtable discussion on women in sports media. She joins us today with a commentary on the Olympics. Amy?
Thanks, Robin. Marina Galperina is the managing editor of a culture and arts blog based in New York City called Animal New York. She's 26 years old, she's gay, and she's Russian. About 6 months ago, when we were talking about the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Marina told me she was planning on traveling there and getting arrested as a form of protesting Russia's anti-LGBT laws. This is who she is, a journalist, but also an activist. When the Winter Games begin on February 7th, Marina will not be in Sochi, but she will be one of the most interesting journalists to watch. It's not only because she's keenly attuned to the politics of her home country when it comes to LGBT rights, but it's also because she's been curating a range of different sources in Russia over the years, many of those who will be on the ground and who will act as her eyes and ears. I recently sat down with her for a 2-hour talk about how she and Animal are preparing to cover the Games, and also why these Olympics are important to politicize. One of the plans she and her publisher, Bucky Turco, are putting into place is for a microsite they own called medaltracker.com. Animal purchased the domain years ago, and it's one of the top Google hits when people search for the medal count. It was a savvy move that has paid off for the company. But this year, Animal will be using the Medal Tracker website as not only a centrifuge for the statistics of each country's medals, but it also will serve as a portal of information about each country's record on gay rights. Marina plans on having the site framed in rainbows, with each country's flag a clickable icon where you can view its human rights LGBT record. She also plans on having a feed of any political news related to LGBT issues happening in Sochi. Her news feed will arguably be one of the most interesting when it comes to these Olympics. Marina clearly has a distinct advantage because she speaks and reads Russian, but she also will bring a unique depth to this type of reporting, because a few years ago she began developing sources through her reporting on Russian dashcam videos. It took countless hours of mining different sources, from mainstream Russian news outlets to listserv groups where she befriended citizen journalists, many of whom are political activists. It's all very deep web. During the Olympics, Marina will be acting as a satellite of sorts, beaming her connections both online and on the ground in Russia to curate all the most relevant news. She isn't sure what will happen once the Games begin, but she told me she's curious about how Russian authorities will enforce the law, since there are little guidelines on what, exactly, will constitute breaking it. It's not like they're going to police effeminate flips of wrist or people holding hands, Marina told me. As an expatriate queer person, I think one of the most interesting elements of this extremely draconian law is the vagueness of it. There are only 6 known out athletes who will be competing in Russia. None are from the United States. But they and their fellow colleagues all share a risk in which the International Olympic Committee has clearly outlined for them. But displaying any form of political propaganda while in competition or on the medal podium will be in violation of the Olympic Charter Rule 50, which prohibits racial, religious, or political demonstrations or propaganda. And while the IOC says that athletes will be able to share their views in interviews or during press conferences, there have been mixed messages sent from organizers on whether that will be allowed to happen within officially designated Olympic zones. Recently, a top Sochi chief executive said that athletes will only be able to express their political views in the designated protest zone, which is 11 miles from the Olympic venues and which, as of now, is only legally safe place to demonstrate or protest. As for whether there will be athletes who take a stand, it's unclear. Marina understands why athletes wouldn't want to speak up, and feels it's unfair that they've been thrust into a potential choice of being either an athlete or an activist. It's the perception that's forced on them because of this censorship, she told me. The greater wrong element of all of this is the fact that part of a person's identity is systematically isolated and demonized. There will be over 2,500 athletes competing in these games. There will be human rights groups, journalists, activists, citizens, all in Sochi, many of whom will be looking to fight for the right of the Russian LGBT community. But when the games are over and everyone leaves this resort town situated in the unlikeliest part of the country to hold a Winter Olympics, how will the Russian people's rights improve? Is it possible for that to even happen? Marina told me she hears from Russians who say it's worse now for LGBT people living there than when the country was under Soviet rule. I asked her, what's the worst case scenario? I think my greatest fear, she told me, is that this blows over and everybody forgets. This is Amy K. Nelson. Back to you, Robin.
Thanks, Amy. Terrific start as our sports correspondent. We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and when we come back, we'll be speaking in a 2-segment special with 4 women who are committed and determined that the internet will not be pale male turf. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back to a panel of dynamic women with enough energy to light a city block. Luvvie Ajayi calls herself a Jill of all digital trades, blogging, branding, social media marketing, and she has been called the Olivia Pope of social media because she fixes e-lives. Kimberly Ellis, also known affectionately as Dr. Goddess, is a scholar, a writer, an entertainer, an entrepreneur, and an activist. She writes for a host of outlets, including The Daily Dot, Salon, Alternet, Ebony.com, The Loop 21, and her own Revelations blog. She organized and moderated the Tweeting the Revolution, How Hip-Hop Transformed 140 into 360 panel for Netroots Nation in 2010. Zerlina Maxwell is a political analyst and contributing writer for the New York Daily News. She was featured in the New York Times as a political Twitter voice to follow during the election season, and her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Jet Magazine, on CNN.com, and other mainstream outlets, and she is a commentator on Fox News and MSNBC. And Shireen Mitchell is the founder and executive director of Digital Sisters Incorporated, a nonprofit organization focused on using media and technology to access self-sufficiency tools for women and children traditionally underserved. She founded and became the first chair of the Media and Technology Task Force of the National Council of Women's Organizations, and she is today the president of the National Council of Women's Organizations. And they are going to be discussing the history of African American feminists and womanists online and the future thereof. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm here with a very distinguished trio that may turn into a quartet, we hope, of African-American feminist, womanist bloggers and writers and activists. There's Luvvie Ajayi, there's Zerlina Maxwell, and there is Shireen Mitchell. And we're hoping that we'll be joined by Kimberly Ellis, that is a.k.a. Dr. Goddess. I want to start by asking each of you in alphabetical order, starting with Luvvie, to just identify yourselves and say a few words about yourself so that people can connect the voice with the person, please.
Gotcha. I'm a writer and a digital strategist, and I love using technology, and I think it's really important for social change. And I also am the executive director of a nonprofit called the Red Pump Project. and we raise awareness about the impact of HIV and AIDS on women and girls.
And I have to put in a little P.S. Luvvie Ajayi is also the 2012 Women's Media Center Social Media Award winner. So there. And I got to present it, too.
Oh, my goodness, I loved it.
Zerlina?
What? Oh, yes, I'm here. My name is Zerlina Maxwell, and I'm a political analyst and writer for a number of different websites, including Feministing, The Griot, Ebony, and RH Reality Check. And I'm passionate about violence against women, preventing violence against women, and also just national politics, Congress, and presidential elections. That's a whole other side of the things that I do.
And on the P.S. to that also, she is speaking, all of you people in Memphis, Tennessee are lucky. She's speaking on the 10th of February at Rhodes College in Memphis. Yes. So, yes. And Shireen.
Hi, Shireen Mitchell here, executive director, used to be executive director of Digital Sisters. I actually founded Digital Sisters in 1999. I focused on issues pertaining to getting women of color into tech and media. And I also am currently the president of the National Council of Women's Organizations, where I also focus on media and technology as it pertains to women in general. And I guess I started in this space a long time ago, starting with a piece I did a long time ago, what does tech have to do with women's rights, trying to sort of engage the women's movement to really look at tech and engineering and science as issues that were important to women back in, I guess it was about 2003, 2004.
Well, the P.S. that I would add to Shireen is that I'm very proud to say that she is also the new Director of Web and Interactive Media for the Women's Media Center. And we are so glad and honored to have her in the family. And she's already made wonderful changes. So let's get started, and then still hope that Kimberly Ellis, Dr. Goddess, will join us. But if not, this trio is pretty impressive as it is, because you're all Renaissance women doing 16 different things of activism and blogging and writing and making good trouble. It seems to me, and maybe this is just me and the people that I follow online, but it seems to me that by far the most vibrant and popular feminist voices blogging and writing online are African American women these days, young African American women. Am I just seeing things through a rose-colored glasses, or do you think this is true? Anybody?
Anybody. Well, this is Zerlina. I would just say that it's not rose-colored, but I would say, certainly there are plenty of high-profile white feminist writers and activists who may or may not get more attention in the quote-unquote mainstream. I don't even know what that word means anymore, because it's sort of been, the technical definition has been changed as we've sort of evolved in this blogging world. But I would say that certainly many of the most well-known feminist spaces online, Crunk Feminist Collective, even Jezebel, which was founded by Anna Holmes. Jezebel sort of gets frequently put into the quote-unquote white feminist basket, but Anna Holmes and Dodai, Anna Holmes, the founder, and Dodai both have been there for a long period. Right. And the same goes for the site that I write for, Feministing, which had a woman of color as the executive editor for over 5 years. And so I would say, yes, absolutely, it's true that women of color, Black women in particular, have used social media and blogging and just the internet to the greatest extent in order to, make our voices heard. And historically they were ignored. But that, the presence of social media doesn't allow for that anymore. Right. Because everyone is accessible, almost anyone is accessible via social media.
Yeah, I think that was Zerlina, right? Who talking?
Yes.
Yes, I thought so.
Yes.
I think I heard a ping. Have we been joined by Kimberly?
Yes.
Hi, Kimberly. This is Dr. Goddess. Say just a word or two about yourself so people can identify the voice and just say where you're coming from, what you do, who you are.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Kimberly Ellis, and I am a scholar and an artist, activist, a techie, and a traveler. I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I enjoy looking at intersectionality. Definitely, I'm an advocate for women telling their stories. I really like to merge scholarship and activism and art. And I think that technology has really shifted our narratives and our voices in a wonderful way. So I enjoy amplifying our voices.
Okay. I was just asking, and Zerlina gave an answer. Anybody else just add in when you feel like it, that it seems to me that the presence of feminism online, the most vibrant presence in blogging, in writing, in editing, in just energy, is African American. Certainly women of color, but most particularly, specifically African American, which I find to be a wonderful celebratory thing. And I was asking, was that just me or was it true? And Zerlina kind of said both and.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ring true for everybody else?
So I would say yes. Even from a historical preference of like looking at the voices that started out when blogging first became on the scene back in 2001, there were women of color like Lynn Johnson who were key aspects of that space and transforming it, despite the fact that even at that time we were having huge issues with the digital divide. There were people out there, including myself, who were focused on trying to change the perspective of our communities in a creative way, and using technology, using online, and using all the tools that we had available to ourselves to make that transformation happen. And I think that when you think about that from a perspective on community changes and community dynamics, I would say absolutely we have very interesting perspectives, voices that should be heard and uplifted more often than more often, I think. And we also have sort of creative stories to tell.
That was Shireen.
Yes. That was Shireen.
I was wondering, I mean, sometimes that happens historically, that if a new technology comes into being or a new mode of communications, it's most threatening to the status quo. You know, when Gutenberg came up with the printing press, the people who could read, which were very few and powerful, went, oh my God, this will be the end of all letters and learning, and we can't illustrate manuscripts in our turrets any longer because the vulgar people out there will have access to books. So it is always a democratization of communication, and it's usually accessed by the poor, by the outs, by the have-nots. So maybe that's part of what's happening. When you get a discriminated against community, they will glom on as fast as possible to anything new that furthers communication. Women, people of color, any of the non-powerful.
Right.
You know. Well, talk a little bit about before we lose Zerlina. I wanted to talk some about your experiences online with naming domestic violence and sexual assault. I know you've been a guest on the program before and talked about that, but do you think that it's women bloggers and writers, especially those who identify themselves as feminists and challenge the status quo, clearly they get a certain reaction from trolls and male supremacists and pajama crazies, especially reserved for them. Do you think that is, I would assume that is intensified when it's a woman of color?
Yeah, I think, there was a lot of talk about, the well-written Amanda Hess article recently about this exact topic. One of the things I do think that, in that it was a very thorough and well-written article, one of the things that I did think was missing was that exact point, that when you are a woman of color in these social media spaces and you're expressing an opinion, you get racism and sexism all together in one nice, ugly package. And I feel that, that isn't necessarily something that is talked about enough, because I think in many ways you're focusing on the fact that it's misogynist or that it's sexist, but, I don't want racism in my feed either.
Of course.
And I think that, certainly racism or sexism is not appropriate just because you disagree with my position. And I think that somebody who is a person of color or historically disadvantaged that is challenging that structure, I wasn't surprised by the fact that I received pushback, on a number of occasions for a variety of things that I've said in the past few years. But I would say that doesn't make it okay, just because I know that patriarchy exists and white supremacy exists, and these structural reasons, lead people to react in this way.
Right.
I think my strategy in dealing with trolls is usually not the "don't feed the trolls" sort of often repeated line. Certainly I do ignore and block certain trolls, but sometimes it's also really effective to shame publicly.
Yes, exactly.
And to, always screen grab, always save, just in case there's an escalation where you have to get law enforcement involved, which is something really ridiculous that women on the internet need to deal with, right? Understanding law that, there might be a time where law enforcement might need to get involved in my internet usage.
I know.
But anyway, but I think that, certainly I believe that if you publicly shame someone for saying something to you, that level of embarrassment, certainly for some folks, will work to prevent that from happening. I think that once I realized that there was a significant drop in the number of, racist and sexist and misogynist threats that I received, when I started, screen grabbing and sharing the tweets that I was receiving and basically stating, I'm going to report this to law enforcement if necessary. So I would suggest that you don't send a death threat, because know that I'm taking it seriously, and I'm not just going to block you and ignore it. I'm going to save it for the police. So tweet at your own risk, really. And so maybe that's putting it a little bit back onto the misogynists. They want to scare me off the internet, and maybe I'm going to scare them off a little bit.
About time. Exactly. We have to pause for a break here, but we'll be right back. We have to pause here briefly. This is Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and we will be right back with more from our panel in just a moment.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And here we are again, ready to rejoin our panel. And we're back. And we lost Zerlina Maxwell in the interim. She had to run to do another interview, but we can make up for lost time with Kimberly Ellis, with Dr. Goddess, and the Twitterverse. But among your many accomplishments is a presence on Twitter that is hardly rivaled, and you're doing a book on this, aren't you?
Well, I am. I started, to start off, I would just want to say that I'm just somebody who largely through a back injury and needing to work on my BlackBerry, just, using my thumbs, discovered this entity, called Twitter, and thoroughly enjoyed the community that I encountered, loved the banter back and forth, loved the vibrance of the community that I encountered. And yes, it was largely Black. It was, I know that it was disproportionately female, and it was just wonderful. And I was just someone, like many people, just enjoying the space because I did not have the opportunity to be in, I want to say, like, those extremely diverse spaces in the community that Twitter brought. So it was just like a 24/7, as someone has described it in the past, like a salon from when Harlem was in vogue, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And just to have like so much intellect and wit and humor and brilliance. I mean, just outright brilliance. And we were just enjoying ourselves and enjoying each other. We didn't really put a label on it except to say, hey, isn't Twitter, fun? Don't we thoroughly enjoy Twitter? And there's something here. But I mean, I am an organizer, and an artist. And so I was noticing like, wow, I tweeted to CNN and like somebody wrote back and said they would correct the story. And then I would see someone else that we just began to correct narratives. We began to in addition to continuing to have fun and watching television together, I was really impressed by the way we began to assert ourselves in the mainstream and be heard.
You have been named one of the most influential black women on Twitter, and you're known also for, I love this, Kimberly, for your twectures. Lectures on Twitter.
A journalist made that up. A journalist made that up just because I started to tweet about Coming to America. We were all watching Coming to America at the same time, and I started to talk about African history and just the African American connection and Pan-Africanism. But I mean that was a discovery. That was definitely not a part of the plan. You know what I mean? It was just something that we just sort of did, and it happened, and then it was wonderful.
Tell about the book.
Yeah.
The book's called The Bombastic
Brilliance.
So I
decided to write this book called The Bombastic Brilliance of Black Twitter.
Love it.
And I mean, Black Twitter in and of itself, as a phrase, as an entity, I mean, it's become a bit controversial, especially because anytime you're dealing with the white gaze, there's a potential, to mischaracterize, to truncate,
but that gets
not get it. But
that gets so boring.
That's being called, and I accept it for what it is. But the great part about Black Twitter, and actually this is a wonderful segue, is that it's actually For Harriet magazine, which we discovered on Twitter, that came up with this, most influential black women on Twitter list. And what I loved about what For Harriet did, which I believe is in African cosmology, is that they were not going to succumb to what was wonderful about Twitter only being about celebrities and whoever had the most followers. They just developed a list with no linear
real people
determination, and
people.
Just said, this is these, we enjoy these people, and here's why. And it was a great list, and I think it was one of the best things they could have ever done. So it's no coincidence that a magazine designed for black women that has this presence online creates a circular type of framework to say that they celebrate these types of voices.
Right. That's
fantastic. To me, that's the epitome of what quote unquote Twitter is.
Tell me where and when the book is available, and when is it due out?
I'm shooting for South by Southwest in March, and it looks like it has to be online first.
Right.
But basically, people will be able to find it at bombasticbrillianceofblacktwitter.com.
Okay, I want to be very sure that everybody gets your Twitter handles and your blog posts. So let me just go around the room, the virtual room. Shireen, do you have one? I know you have a Twitter handle right now. Is it Digital Sister?
Yeah, it's Digital Sister with an A, DIGITALSISTA.
Okay, and Luvvie?
Yes, I'm on Twitter. Luvvie.
And Dr. Goddess?
I'm on Twitter at Dr. Goddess, DRGODDESS.
Okay, I'm going to skip briefly because we're running out of time, but I wish we had... Zerlina
Maxwell.
Yes, that's right. It's just Zerlina Maxwell. I'm going to skip briefly to Luvvie so she can say a few more words about the Red Pump Project, because to my wild frustration, we're running out of time. But say a few more things about that and give the website.
So what we do is empower women and girls to take ownership of their bodies. And we raise awareness about HIV and AIDS by telling people to put on a pair of red shoes and join us for our online campaign, which we have every year, that culminates on March 10th, and that's National Women and Girls HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. They can find Red Pump online. We are at redpump.org. That's our website. And then we're on Twitter at RedPumpProj without the ECT. So hopefully people will join us to put on red shoes on March 10th, and yeah, we're excited for it.
Fantastic. Thank you all, every one of you, and Zerlina in absence, but I thanked her as she left. Thank you so much for joining us here on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Appreciate it.
Now for a brief stop in the Surrealism Corner. This week, I'm putting racism in the Surrealism Corner. Yes, not because racism isn't real. It's very real. We are in no way in a post-racist or post-sexist culture. But because racism, in addition to being real, is also surreal. It's crazy. For example, have you noticed that on the same shelf in a drugstore, there will be skin whiteners right next to tanning lotions? Mostly it's surreal because race doesn't actually exist. It's just a matter of vitamin D and melanin, which defines skin pigmentation, absorbing 99.9% of ultraviolet rays in sunlight as heat. Without it, UV radiation damages DNA through sunburn and skin cancer. Well, back home in Africa, where we all came from, under the intense sun, sufficient melanin was an evolutionary survival advantage, so we all had very dark skin. Then, because of certain local places suffering drought and famine, some of us migrated north and east around the globe. North of the equator, where sun exposure was far less, paler skin allowed more sunlight penetration, meaning we could internally produce more vitamin D. So, in the north, paleness became a survival advantage. Then, as people settled in different areas, their local genetic mixes bred local characteristics. They intermarried. Geographical ethnicities, so to speak, were the product. But geographical ethnicities. Race itself is a myth. It's all about getting enough vitamin D. If the fascinating work of genetic anthropologist Spencer Wells were taught in every third-grade class, we just might eradicate racism in a single generation. In the meanwhile, racism belongs in the Surrealism Corner. Time for one last break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still Robin Morgan. We'll be back with the author of a book about a group of women who individually and together had a profound effect on the civil rights movement, and the connections have never been spotted until this book, and now.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. Our next guest, Ruth Feldstein, teaches at Rutgers in the Department of History, Graduate Program in American Studies, and the Program in Women's and Gender Studies. Her first book, Motherhood in Black and White, Race and Sex in American Liberalism, is an intellectual and cultural history of liberalism from the New Deal to the Great Society, and the book argued that conservative gender ideologies were central to the process through which race became prominent in American liberalism. She's currently celebrating the publication of her new book about the significance of black women entertainers to the civil rights movement and to the development of contemporary feminism. That book is what we'll discuss today. Welcome, Ruth Feldstein. Welcome, Ruth, to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you.
Well, it's an honor to read this book. I have to tell you, How It Feels to Be Free, which of course is a line from the great Nina Simone delivered. She didn't write it, but she made it famous song, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. How It Feels to Be Free is a really interesting, important new book. Its subtitle is Black Women Entertainers and the Civil Rights Movement. And it's an exploration of the very little paid attention to, but absolutely crucial role that black cultural entertainers, particularly women, played in making the civil rights movement what it was. I was in it. I knew these songs by heart. They were our anthems. And thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
Tell some of the wonderful stories from it, because, I mean, the people that are focused on are Lena Horne, Miriam Makeba, Nina Simone, the great Nina Simone, Abby Lincoln, Diane Carroll, and Cicely Tyson. Some of them friends of each other, right?
Right, yes. Most of them knew each other. They came of age together professionally and politically in New York City in the late 50s and early 60s, a period of time when the great cultural innovations they and others were doing, and creative progressive politics were happening together and reinforcing each other. So that's the atmosphere in which they came of age.
It's amazing. Go on.
And the women that I write about, I think one of the things that I find really interesting about it is that there was no one way in which they engaged politically. There were many different kinds of challenges that they issued. So that in the 1940s, Lena Horne was defined as a sex symbol. And what I argue is that that was a very subversive thing for her to do. Yep. Because for a black woman to be considered a sex symbol meant that she wasn't available, that she was beautiful.
That's right.
And historically, up to that point, categories like glamour and beauty had excluded African-American women.
Precisely.
So for Lena Horne in that period of time to be called a sex symbol, and for her to insist, as she did when she was touring for soldiers during World War II, that African-American soldiers get better seats and that she would perform for them and not for prisoners of war who in one performance got the seats and the black soldiers didn't. And she said, no, I won't perform for them. For her to make those kinds of claims was saying, black men have the right to look at me, and I can be a glamorous sex symbol for them too.
Absolutely.
And that was very, very radical.
Yes.
30 years later, Cicely Tyson made very different kinds of challenges. When she appeared in the movie Sounder in 1972, she played the part of Rebecca, who is a woman who's living in the 1930s. It's a family of sharecroppers, very, very poor. She's distinctly unglamorous. She's sweaty. She's wearing very old and worn clothes. Her hair is wrapped. She's wearing a big bonnet. And she's a loving woman, a loving mother. She's a strong woman. There's this incredible scene in the movie Sounder. Her husband has been in prison for quite a long time. And there's this remarkable reunion scene between the two of them where she sees him coming down the road and they run to each other. And it's passionate and it's romantic and it's sexual and it's also anchored in this family life as the children run up to them too. And after Sounder came out, Cicely Tyson got a letter from a fan who said, I never knew that kind of love went on between a black man and woman. I thought you were sexual animals.
Oh, my God.
So there in the 70s, Tyson is making a very different kind of challenge than Lena Horne did 30 years earlier, but similarly claiming female power and black female power as important to black liberation and making female power part of that vision of liberation.
Yes, yes. And Nina Simone, who is my end-all, be-all,
yes,
whom I just worshipped and heard live once, major moment of my life, just a consummate artist, an amazing musician and artist and songwriter. And with her, it was right out there. I mean, Mississippi Goddam, which was the song that she wrote, made it very, very clear. And just so much, her version of Strange Fruit ranks right up there with the Billie Holiday version. I mean, but they were more than anthems. They were what we listened to as we fell asleep. If we were doing voter registration in the South, this is what we played and danced to. You make an interesting point, too, which I've always felt, but I had never heard anybody else say. You said, you write at one point, in all sorts of ways, these women insisted that the liberation they desired could not separate race from sex. And in fact, you point to their establishing a woman's voice pre-feminism that helped make the 20th century feminism possible. And I think that's absolutely true.
Right. I would echo that and just add that I think that they were trailblazers, and part of what drew me to this project was that I feel that these are women who helped to make two transformative social movements of the 20th century,
Yes.
both the civil rights movement and women's liberation. And even though they didn't call themselves feminists per se, they were articulating the demands and the concerns that became central to women's liberation and to black feminism specifically. And when you think about Mississippi Goddam, which you just mentioned, Nina Simone wrote that song in September of 1963, and she wrote it in response to the Birmingham church bombing when 4 girls had been killed, and just after the murder of Medgar Evers. And she called that her first civil rights song. But when you think about that, that was September 1963.
Mm-hmm.
The March on Washington was a month earlier. Just a few months earlier, Betty Friedan's classic, The Feminine Mystique, had come out.
Right.
So all of those things are happening at the same time. And Simone, again, is challenging the ethos of the March on Washington in her rejection of interracial activism, in her rejection of a church-based movement,
right.
in her insistence on change needing to happen right now, her rejection of a slow, gradual focus on legislation.
Right.
But she's also transforming what we think of as the early aspects of women's liberation by insisting on female power for working black women,
right.
and not focused on domesticity and women at home.
Oh,
so
yes.
again, she's really engaging and helping to make both of these social movements.
And the sexual politics in a song like For Women of Simone's, if you haven't heard it, listeners, catch up. The sexual politics is so profound and complex, and it presages radical feminism. I mean, way, way, way beyond what Friedan was envisioning. So these women laid a foundation for a whole lot of things. And Simone's just dignity as an artist, as a human being, was the most extraordinary thing to be in the presence of. I once heard a concert of hers in a club, and when the teaspoon rattled as she was singing, she stopped the song. She put her. She was sitting at the piano. She put her hands in her lap. She looked out and she said, "We'll just wait." And let me tell you, you could hear a pin drop in the room, and nothing else was said, so that her art was given its full due. Oh, this is such a great book. Thank you. It's called, again, How It Feels to Be Free. Black Women Entertainers and the Civil Rights Movement. It's a very important contribution to the Civil Rights Movement history, to women's history, to the history of art and music. And I thank you for having written it.
Thank you so much.
And now it's time for Fighting Words. The shadow family of Thomas Jefferson is exemplary of the deepest truths about American racism, the horror being not solely what whites did to blacks, but what relatives did to their own families. Where does this entire vast panoply of interrelationships, complete with a hierarchy of how many crossbreedings were necessary to, quote, clear the blood, close quote, where does this fit into a history of the family? Or is it a shadow history necessary to contain it, this common assumption that a plantation owner had 2 families, one slave, one white? The plot thins as the blood thickens. Think of Thomas Jefferson Hemmings, age 14, slave son with blue eyes and red hair and freckles, tall and gangling, the image of his father, standing as body servant behind the chair of Thomas Jefferson Randolph. Age about the same coloring, same characteristics of appearance, grandson legal, looking like a possible set of twins. What does this do to the mind, the sense of reality, the reality of Jeffersonian politics? Politics that are possibly the one trustable democratic tradition in this country. What does it mean that Thomas Jefferson could seek the same woman in the features of his white legal wife, Martha Wales, dead at age 34 after 7 pregnancies, and his illegal white-black, black-white, continually recategorized slave, wife, mistress, concubine, Sally Hemmings, who was Martha Wales' half-sister? This was his own sister-in-law, except that she was out of law. Sally Hemmings haunts America, Jefferson, me. And Jefferson was one of the best, perhaps the best of the lot, the founding so-called fathers. No Alexander Hamilton, Hamilton, rumored to be part black, must express the essentially aristocratic conservative position, to survive, of course. Not Jefferson. No, he staked his life on the belief that the individual soul needs freedom and can stand that responsibility no matter what. He staked Sally Hemmings' soul on it too, but he never asked her permission to do so first. Or perhaps he did, and perhaps she said no. Or perhaps he did, and he forgot what she replied. Or perhaps it was her idea in the first place, but he didn't note that, being above the petty details of ownership. And they dare to speak of the sanctity of the family. They dare claim reverence for blood ties. Oh, America, there is blood on your hands, and you don't even recognize it as your own. Jefferson disowned his slave children not because they were black, which by his own racial structure of insanely pedantic blood charts they weren't. He disowned them because he would not cease owning them, that is, because they were slaves. Yet white slaves were unheard of. If you're white, you're not a slave. If you're a slave, you're not white. Whiteness, or sameness, could not coexist with slavery in the same person. If you are female, you are not mankind. If you are human, you are not a slave. Jefferson's slave children were unacknowledged not because they were different, but because they were the same. The lie of the inner and the outer. The lie of kin beneath the skin, when we are really saying that we are trying to deny something more fearful. Being kin, period. This was Jefferson's lie. His hypocrisy was built on this. How to reconcile all this, then, with realizing that racism and sexism could be simply speed-written as hate generalizes, love specifies. The blood on my hands is my own. Old news to whomever shed it. That's our show for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM or visiting us at WMClive.com to access this and to access any of our previous episodes. Be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here is the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and for this program Executive Producer Julie Burton, Senior Producer Crystal Williams Chancellor, and our founding sponsor Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thanks for being with us. Join us next week when MSNBC political commentator Karen Finney will be here, as will Gloria Felt on the upcoming Take the Lead conference, plus WMC President Julie Burton on the latest WMC research publication. And a surprise guest you will not want to miss. So look for us on Facebook and Twitter for alerts about that guest and about exclusive breaking news segments and future shows, only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.